Welcome, everyone. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. As you join, let us know where in the world you're joining from. I am taking today's call from Costa Rica. There's some chickens and roosters in the background that you might hear on this webinar. So, full disclosure, where are you today, Nicole?
I just got to Mexico a few weeks ago, so I'm happy to be back here and relaxing, enjoying Mexico life.
Amazing. So I'm in Costa Rica, you're in Mexico. Those who are joining us, put in the chat where in the world you're joining from. I always love to hear where we have people coming from because it's typically quite a global audience. And especially with a topic like we're talking about today, I'm expecting that to be the same. Already got someone from Malaysia, amazing. Taiwan, Bosnia, Vancouver, New
Cool.
York, Colombia. Amazing. So please let us know where you're joining from. And we also want to just get a pulse on everyone's experience with today's topic. So I think I have a poll here. I'm going to turn on, launch that. Let us know if you already have a tax optimized business structure in place, or if you're considering establishing one in the future. Put that in the poll. Okay, we got Berlin, more Costa Rica, London, more Mexico. Did you say where in Mexico you are today, Nicole?
I'm in Morelia, which is, I always have to preface, it's 3 to 4 hours from Mexico City.
Okay, I'm glad you prefaced. I've never heard of that. I've been to Mexico probably like 5 times, but why there?
So my partner is Mexican and he's from here and he hasn't seen his family for a while. So we like to come see family. We'll go back to Canada, see my family while we're here because it's close proximity and then head off into the world again.
Amazing. I'm Canadian as well.
I love that.
Hmm. Okay, so people are filling out the poll. They're telling us where they're joining from. I'm really excited to pass the mic over to you, Nicole, because we're going to get really into the weeds of an important topic for the nomad movement and the digital nomads that are joining us today. So I'm going to do my intro. I'm Sam. If you are new to this webinar series, I have had the pleasure of getting to host for the last year and a half. All of these webinars have been recorded and are on our YouTube channel. So if you are here for the first time, definitely go back and see some of the other webinars that we've hosted. We've invited amazing, talented, skilled experts like Nicole to come in here and share really important information that's going to help our ambassador community, which is a little bit of foreshadowing of what we're going to talk a little bit about later on today, and even invite you to join us as an ambassador, which is what Nicole is for us. So I'm Sam. When I'm not doing this, I host the Freedom Lifestyle podcast for remote workers, nomads, and I'm guessing people who are joining today's call. Nicole from Work Wealth Travel. Welcome, Nicole. How you feeling?
I am so excited to dive into this topic with everyone today. I'm ready.
Amazing. Yeah, you were saying you were practicing, you got lots of content, but we're going to save room for Q&A. So if you have questions for Nicole as she's going through the presentation, put them in the Q&A box. We'll come and do a bit of a fireside chat at the end. If you're meeting Nicole for the first time, a little bit about Nicole. She started out in corporate Canada before moving to China and securing a second residency and a second passport. Her mission is to now provide you with knowledge, tools, and resources to become a successful global citizen, which we're going to dive into even what that means and our definition of that today, because I'm curious about that. She covers a range of topics, including entrepreneurship, finance, travel, personal development, all in an effort to help you build a sustainable and fulfilling lifestyle that's authentic to you. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
So yes, questions at the end, put them in the Q&A box. And then if you are new here, a little bit about the company that's putting on this webinar series. SafeDoing has a vision of building a global social safety net for remote workers and for digital nomads, which I'm guessing if you're on the call, you're likely one of the two, or you're aspiring to live more freely and have less geographical barriers to your approach and how you live your life. And that really is SafetyWing's mission. They want to be your home country on the internet and remove any barriers that are preventing people from having equal opportunity to travel and freely become global citizens. And SafeDoing got their start with their product Nomad Insurance. To date, it's still our fastest growing product, over 100,000 customers worldwide. And it's a product that protects you with affordable health and medical coverage whenever you are traveling outside of your home country. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how you can join us on this mission later on. But on that note, I'm ready to pass things over to you, Nicole.
Let's get into it. Let me share my screen. Just give me
I'll,
1 second.
I'll also stop the poll so we can see what
Yes,
people have
very
said coming into this
curious.
session. Oh, wow. So it's pretty split.
Okay. So about 50-50.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive into some options and at the end, maybe hear some of the options that the audience has chosen as well. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about beyond borders and really some beneficial and tax optimized company formation options for entrepreneurial digital nomads and global citizens. All right, so we've already done the poll, 50-50, good to know. So first, I'm going to dive into what we will learn today. And yes, this is me at the Chronicle of Georgia in Tbilisi. I'm sure some people watching and in the audience have been there. Such an incredible place to visit. Highly recommend if you're in Georgia. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn why a global lifestyle and diversification is important. We're also going to talk about some beneficial jurisdictions for digital nomads, for content creators, for global citizens, for company formation. We are going to look at some pieces of the puzzle to start your own strategy, where to begin, and what that process looks like. And as I was running through this, I realized that there is a lot we're going to dive into today. So I'm sure that there will be some questions at the end, which is totally fine. I welcome any questions, but we are going to be diving into a few different jurisdictions and pieces of the puzzle today. All right, so who is going to benefit from this? Now, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, global citizens, as I mentioned, who are looking to establish their lives and their businesses abroad. This is not going to be the most beneficial structure for you to have a tax optimized structure abroad. If you are looking to, at some point in the future, return to your home country, to live there, to have a lot of those flags, which we're going to be talking about later in the presentation, in your home country, this may not be so beneficial for you, but I don't think that is the audience who is here today. If you're here today, you are probably looking to create a diversified lifestyle abroad. It's also for those looking to take advantage of tax breaks and low taxation in countries around the globe, which we will get into. And this really works best, as I mentioned, when you are no longer tied to your home country or home countries. Maybe that's your country of residence. Maybe that's where you are currently a resident, if that is not where you were born or your passport countries. So we're going to dive into all of this today. Before we do, let's chat a little bit about me. So I am Nicole. I have been both a digital nomad and an expat, and I've experienced the pros and cons of both lifestyles. They are two very different lifestyles. Expat, I found I was really doing a lot of the similar things that I would have just done in my home country. I was just doing it in another country. I was going to work for somebody else. I was, being with friends on the weekend, and I could have done that in any country around the world, working a 9 to 5. Digital nomad is very different. And I personally find you have to be very self-starter and motivated, especially as an entrepreneurial digital nomad, if you want to get anything done. So I left my home country of Canada in 2017 and never returned, or at least at the time, I hoped to never return. That was the best case scenario for me if I found a better country, a better lifestyle, a better way of living that was more aligned with me. Hopefully, I would never be going back to Canada, which is thankfully how it worked out. And however, I continued to pay tax on my Canadian source income while I was abroad. While I was a resident somewhere else, any money that I made in Canada, and this is the case for quite a few other countries, I still had to pay tax on that money in Canada. So that was not fun because I was making money in those two countries, and then I was getting taxed in both of those countries. So once I started my business and became more nomadic, I started paying 0% tax. And now, after having been on this journey for many years, I help others and I help my clients from around the globe to become what I like to call diversified global citizens, paying low or no tax. And I also help clients obtain multiple residencies, citizenships, have banking options around the globe, all of these things that really go into this piece of the puzzle. A lot of the time, if you are what I like to call a global citizen, you want to leave your home country, you want to pay low or no tax, but you also want the diversification options of having multiple citizenships, having multiple residencies, having multiple bank accounts, which is a topic that I love talking about because it's only becoming increasingly more difficult to do this specific piece of the puzzle in quite a few countries around the globe. But this is really what I help clients do, is become completely diversified and not having ties to one specific country where that country can lay claim to essentially everything you have. And for me, I know Sam mentioned at the beginning a little bit of a difference, in my opinion, between a digital nomad and a global citizen. So in my work, the way that I like to diversify that and really differentiate it is that a digital nomad, you're starting out on your journey, you maybe are staying in your home country 6 months a year or 3 months a year or 9 months a year, or maybe 0 months a year, but at some point there, the long-term picture isn't quite there yet. You don't know if you're going to be going back to your home country in the future, if you're going to buy a house in your home country and have a life in 10 or even 20 years in the future. Whereas what I like to differentiate as a global citizen is when unless things really, really go horrible, and even potentially not even then, that you are going to be living a diversified lifestyle abroad and you're going to be making investments abroad and real estate and buying homes abroad, which is also what we help clients with to get started on their journey. You want to have those multiple residencies, passports, and then, of course, having that low or no tax business structure in place, which probably, if you're from a Western country, a high tax country, that's not so much going to be feasible for you. So that's kind of how I like to differentiate. I started out as an expat, went to a digital nomad, and then it became more of a global citizen. So I'm sure many of you here are also on a very similar journey and trajectory. Okay, so why this matters. Okay, let's get into it. So, in my opinion, there are certain ways to build great wealth, and entrepreneurship is one of them. But many governments want to keep the middle class, and they sell the middle class American dream. This dream is not for the wealthy, and many of the wealthy are beyond the government control. However, there are so many beneficial jurisdictions and governments around the globe that will reward new residents, new businesses with great incentives, and low or no tax is just one of those great incentives. And a lot of these countries where you have the American dream and the middle class are not going to reward you for wanting to be an entrepreneur, for wanting something more in your life than just working for the man, let's say, and earning that 5, 6 figure 9 to 5 salary. So, in my opinion, go where you're treated best. I'm sure you've probably heard this before. And this is what I truly believe. And this is why I left my home country and I have no plans to go back. It was Canada, by the way. And I have really seen in doing this work how many different jurisdictions there are around the globe that benefit me, that want my dollars, but that I also want to give them my dollars. I want to spend time in that country because they are rewarding me and my business with low, no tax, with a great lifestyle without paying the outrageous costs that Canada and America and many other countries have now become in terms of rent and cost of living and buying a home. And so I want to give my dollars back to those countries that benefit me. Are they always going to be the best countries? In some cases, no, but they're benefiting me. And so that relationship works for me. And this is the way that I see it. This is why I left my home country and I wanted to go somewhere that really worked for me instead of me working for that country and just staying middle class. Okay, so you have options. If you're a digital nomad, if you are a global citizen, and if you have a life abroad, if you don't plan to return to your home country anytime soon, you have options. So today we are going to discuss some of the lucrative jurisdictions for nomadic content creators, nomadic entrepreneurs, global citizens, whether you are just starting out on your business journey or whether you are well established. We're also going to look into some of the considerations to think about before the company formation. The company formation is not the first piece of the pie. So we're going to look at what some of those considerations before the actual jurisdiction and figuring out where is best to open your company comes into play. So don't set up your business in a tax beneficial jurisdiction as step one, like I just mentioned. There are some considerations such as your current country of residence, your citizenship. You may need to live in that country first, depending. So we're going to talk about what all of this looks like. And then it also depends on the country that you're currently tied to. So for me, in my case, just going back here, I was tied to Canada. And then I was tied to China. Now, both of these are not very tax beneficial. And also, not only the taxes, but not somewhere that I really wanted to live for the rest of my life. And so I had to figure out the long-term trajectory and the long-term plan of what I wanted my future to look like, and then start building backward from there. Okay, so another important consideration, and this is one that I always caveat with when I am speaking to clients, because things are always changing. Governments are always changing their programs and their incentives, and usually it's not to benefit the residents or the business owners. So I always recommend to get in on this program, this company formation, if it's a residency or a citizenship that you could be eligible for in the future. Get in on it now while it's available. In the past few years, even just the last year, we have seen countless programs increase the capital needed for company formations, business formations, and then those could potentially lead to residency in some cases. And a good example of this is Panama. So they had the Friendly Nations visa a few years back. And Friendly Nations, there were around 50 different nations. And if you had a passport from one of these nations, then you could apply for their Friendly Nations visa. Now, it used to be 5K bank deposit and a few other criteria, as there always is, documents, some bureaucracy around that, but a 5K bank deposit and you would have your residency. How easy is that? Okay, that's no longer the case. Now it's around 200K in real estate in order to obtain the exact same Friendly Nations visa in Panama. So this is a perfect example, and there are countless others, but this is a great example to illustrate that these programs are always changing. Governments are usually always increasing the capital needed in order to qualify for these programs. Of course, they want people to qualify for these programs, but they want higher and higher net worth individuals and business owners to be the ones who are bringing the dollars and the money and living in their country. So if you are applicable right now, I have some clients I'm working with now who are applicable for citizenship by descent. Descent is a great example. Get in on that now, because while the criteria for that program doesn't change too often, the documents may change that are needed. You don't know what these governments are going to put in place next. And like I say here, it's usually not to benefit you, it's to benefit them. And they're going to make it more difficult for you. If something is of interest now, get on it now. Another great example is the Caribbean citizenship by investment. Last year, one of the passports, there's 5, one of them went up significantly in cost for the donation in order to get a passport. So speaking to my team on the ground in the Caribbean, we foresee that the other 4 islands, well, it's around 100, 150K to buy a passport, which is wild right now. It's likely going to increase at some point this year. Nothing has officially been released yet, But these are changes that we foresee coming, and it'll probably be around $250,000, depending on the island. But 100 to 150K jumping to $250,000 is a significant chunk. So moral of the story, get in on the program while you can. Okay, so another important consideration. When assessing where to establish your company, other factors are going to come into play. So you're going to be looking at, what is the business activity? What is your annual income? Are you just starting out, or is the business pretty established at this point? Where's your personal residency? Where's your personal tax residency? These are all things that are going to come into play before we actually think, let's say Bulgaria looks like a great place to start a business. Okay, we can't just say blanket Bulgaria. There are other factors that we have to look into before actually determining what is the best jurisdiction to open this business. Where are the clients? If the clients are in America, does that really make sense to have a bank account in Bulgaria just because you're living there? You might have some better options. So this is an important consideration, along with the 5 flag theory. So I'm sure that most people on this call, I'd actually be curious. I guess it's too late for a poll, but I would be curious, how many of you have heard of the 5 flag theory? I would bet probably most of you. So there are 5 flags, and within this theory, it actually started as the 3 flag theory. Now it's commonly known as the 5 flag theory, but there are so many more flags than just 5 now. It could easily be 9 or 10 flags. With our globalized world, there are so many more considerations than just these 5 right here. But essentially, the 5 flag theory really highlights the importance of having diversification in these 5, and then these additional, and there's more as well, but all of these different flags. So the first one is your citizenship. The second is your residency, and then you have your tax residency, your business formation, what country that's in, and then your banking, what countries you do your banking in. So ideally, you do not want to have German citizenship and have German residency, and then have German tax residency because you live there, and then have your business in Germany, and then bank in Germany. So Germany lays claims to everything that you have, which if you live in Germany, and this is why it really comes into play for being a global citizen or a digital nomad. If you want to live in Germany your whole life and you're born there and your family's there, that's great. But you don't really have these options that digital nomads and global citizens have. So it really is that lifestyle, that long-term trajectory of what you want your life to look at, and that what I like to call lifestyle design. And then once you know, okay, I want to live a diversified lifestyle, which there are definitely some challenges and pre-planning that come along with that, that I myself have also had to deal with. But you want to have your citizenship from one country, or ideally 2 or 3 or 4 countries is the most ideal. And then your residency, so to live in another country. Your tax residency may sometimes be in the same country that you have residency in. Sometimes it may look different. You want to have your business set up in a different country from your citizenship and your residency, if at all possible. And then you want, I always recommend, to have open as many bank accounts, especially personal business. It will be likely tied to where you have the business set up. And you can have your business set up in various different jurisdictions, depending on the business that you run. But you really want to have your banking as diversified as possible. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on with fintechs as well, but it is becoming, like I previously mentioned, so much more difficult in today's day and age to just go to a country and open up a bank account. They will almost always ask you for your residency. I usually do this in every single country that I go to every few months. I'll walk into the bank and see if I can open up a bank account. And the answer I expect to be, and it is, almost always no. You need to be a resident in that country, but there are still some beneficial countries where you can open a bank account, and sometimes you don't even need to be in that country. So take advantage, like I previously mentioned, take advantage of these programs while you can, because these governments, they may be able to allow people who are tourists, potentially residents, or just visitors to open bank accounts for the next 10 years, but that could also change. And we don't know what that's going to look like and what the decisions from the higher ups are going to be. So open as many bank accounts around the globe as you can. Sometimes there's a minimum balance. Sometimes there's literally no minimum balance. So then we have some other flags. So We have playgrounds, which playgrounds consist of where you want to spend your time. And also just to note, the 5 like theory, what I have found just through looking online, these main 5 ones look a little bit different for everyone. So that's why I'm including some additional ones here, but there are much more than these where you have your entire life set up around the globe. So playgrounds, which is where you like to spend your time, where you have real estate potentially, where you have boats, and where you rent a marina, that can be a tie to a country as well. Digital privacy is becoming increasingly more important. So if you use Google Chrome, Google Workspace for your business, well, Google, then wherever their databases are, they hold all of that information on you. So you really want to try to diversify that as much as possible. Your asset havens, where you hold your investments, your trusts, your foundations, your crypto, all of the assets that you hold, diversify those as well. Don't have those in just one, or if you're playing this game, even 2 countries. And I like to call it a game because in my years of doing this myself, and then also through clients and seeing their structures, it really is a game. And I have a podcast. I've talked about this on the podcast and guested on podcasts about this, how this lifestyle becomes a game. And I love it. It's fun. But if you are going to be flying and living all over the globe, there's definitely some backstage work that goes on. All right, so now we're going to dive into some of these potentially lucrative countries and jurisdictions where you can set up your company. So again, these are not going to be blanket good for everyone. It depends on your residency, your business. There's so many factors that go into this, but these are some of the most common and most beneficial jurisdictions for company formation. So I had to start with Estonia. I'm sure that many of you, I know for sure, some of you have a company formation in Estonia. It is very popular in the digital nomad sphere and space, not always something that I would recommend for everyone. Again, it depends on your situation. So in Estonia, you have a 0% corporate tax and then a 20% tax on distributed profits, which is not bad. So whenever you actually take money out of the business, then that's when you pay tax. If you keep money in the business, then you won't pay any tax. And then the VAT is required when you hit 40K euros or more annually. So they also have the e-residency program, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. I have a little bit of an issue with the naming of this, just because of the fact that it makes it sound like you can gain residency online, which is not the case. It's really just an easy registration and management of residency for those who are already residents and who have put in the work, the time on the ground, whatever it may be, to get the residence. It's not really so much of an e-residency program where you can just sign up and become a resident online. I wish it was that easy. Next, we have Singapore. So Singapore starts at 17% for tax, which doesn't sound quite so great, but there are some startup tax exemption schemes in Singapore for the first 3 years in business. So the 75% tax exemption you have on your first 100K of income, and then it is 50% exemption on the next 100K. So not a bad tax exemption to really start getting your business off the ground. Of course, this isn't forever, but the first 3 years while your business is still a baby and an infant, this is a great tax break. Singapore also has a great financial system for banking, of course, and really trustworthy options. So in my opinion, Singapore is a great example of a country wanting your business to grow and thrive, and the country really supporting you as an entrepreneur instead of some other countries that will see your business being somewhat successful, making into the 6 figures the first or second year, and then want their cut of that and start taxing you at sometimes exorbitant amounts of tax each year. So Singapore really supports you in the starting up the first few years of your business to really get going, which I love, which I'm all about. That's a country that I would want to go and spend my money and support. Okay, next we have US, UK, Canada. So these can be beneficial countries if you are not a citizen of that country. So I am a citizen of Canada as one of my passports. So to set up this formation as it's a pass-through entity isn't going to make sense for me. But of course, I have the US and the UK as some other options. So These three countries offer pass-through entities so that taxation in the business flows through to your personal residency, which is really nice, but this requires pre-planning. And like I said, it only works if you're a foreigner in that country, and you don't have to live in that country, but you just have to not be a passport holder of that country. So there are stipulations in each country. For example, in some of them, you can't have employees in that country. You cannot physically go to work in that country. So there are some stipulations depending on the country that you are looking into. And then there is potential for more reporting requirements depending on the country. So a good example of this, and very fun to start filing the BOI at the beginning of this year. So just about a month and a half ago, the US came out with the BOI reporting, along with you have to do annual filing for the state. You have to have a registered agent. You have to fill out the 1120 and some other forms, depending on if it's a single or two or multiple member LLC that you have. So there is reporting requirements. And especially with the US, if you are really looking for privacy, then this is probably not going to be the best structure for you. Of course, you have the US, you have Canada, or you have the UK, you have Canada, and you have other countries in general as options. But if you're looking for that pass-through entity, if your personal tax residency and residency is set up properly, and you want to be a little bit more anonymous and have some privacy, which many do, then the reporting requirements for the US are probably not going to be where it's at for you anymore, because they do require to know your address now, your name, where you're a resident and a tax resident of. So the reporting is becoming increasingly more as the years go on. And then also important, the last point there, to know the reporting requirements, not only for these structures, but for any company structure, the reporting requirements before setting up your company, because I've unfortunately heard some horror stories of company formations being set up and then not knowing that you have to do annual filing, for example. Otherwise, the state will close your business and you can get it reinstated, but it's not fun to have to deal with in the first place. So you really want to know what those reporting requirements are going to look like beforehand, if at all possible. Okay, next up, we have Bulgaria. So a great place in Europe for company formation. It is the lowest taxation in Europe. There is a 10% flat corporate taxation rate, which I love flat corporate taxation rates. You can get down to 7.5% in tax when operating as a freelancer in Bulgaria, if the business qualifies. And then you do this by deducting 25% of your fixed income, of your fixed expenses from your income. So effectively, you can have a 7.5% taxation rate. Again, beneficial when you're starting your business and when you really need as much capital as possible. And then dividends are exempt for Bulgarian residents. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but residency is the first step and company formation is not the first step. Uruguay. I've spent the last year and a half in Latin America. And as much as I love Asia and I love other parts of the world, there's so much opportunity here in Latin America, not only with company formation. I've been looking into real estate with my teams on the ground. And that's why we haven't been able to leave Latin America at this point. I don't know when we're going to end up leaving because there's so many beneficial programs. But Uruguay specifically, for company formations, they have the free zone. So you can open a free zone entity in Uruguay, pay 0% tax if your business is registered in a free zone, which it should be if you want that 0% tax. And if you're going to start doing business in Uruguay and having your structure there, definitely do the free zone. You do have to employ 75% local employees or have special permission to not have that 75% of local employees. And most people think, when they think of, I think Uruguayan specifically and one other country, which I'm going to get to, they think of the free zone for goods, but you could also have free zone for services. So digital marketing, consulting, you will still, again, if you don't have that special permission, which we work with our clients depending on the business and what that can look like to get that, but you will still need the 75% local employees, but it can also be for services, not only for goods. Next, we have Romania. So Romania is a 16% standard tax rate, but with the micro company regime, if the business has less than €500,000 annually, and now it's less than $500,000, then you'll only pay a 1% tax. So at least 80% of the business revenue needs to be generated from activities other than consulting and management, and you have to have at least one employee in Romania. So again, there are some stipulations. Is it going to be the best structure along with all of these? For you, if you are starting out, you do need to have that one employee. The 80% does need to be coming from something other than management and consulting. Not going to be the best for everyone, but for a certain business and for a certain entrepreneur, it's going to make sense. Next up, we have Peru, a country I don't really see talked about a lot. I was actually there about 2 or 3 months ago. And oh my gosh, I was blown away by how amazing Peru is. But they also have a very favorable company formation tax. So if the business brings in less than around 140K, it's in the local currency, but converted it's around 140,000 USD, then it will be subject to a 1.5% taxation rate. The typical tax rate is 30%, standard for most countries, quite honestly. And then dividends and capital gains are taxed at 5%. So if you're starting out your business less than 140K approximately, then that's not a bad tax rate, 1.5% taxation. And I fell in love with Peru. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. We didn't even go to Machu Picchu. And we went to the desert and it was amazing. Anyways, conversation for another time. Okay, next we have Paraguay. So Paraguay is great as well. It has a flat 10% taxation rate on local owned companies. So this is the EAS structure in Paraguay. And the owner of the business must be a resident, which is fairly straightforward to actually obtain. It is good when paired with an LLC, pass-through entity, or some other options. So you can have the LLC through Paraguay residents, or you can also have the EAS company, which is similar to an LLC, but it's an actual foreign, local owned company in Paraguay, the EAS. And Paraguay also offers a 1% tax on maquila law, which maquila law started in Mexico, because Mexico is, of course, in close proximity with the US to allow for lower taxation rates when importing into the US. So Paraguay also has adopted something similar through their maquila law, and they have a 1% tax rate. If you have services or products that are being assembled in Paraguay, shipped abroad, there is a certain percentage that needs to be assembled in Paraguay versus abroad. So we help our clients go through kind of that whole process. And I also have some further information about maquila on my YouTube. I was in Paraguay for the second time a few months back. And there's, like I said, there's so much opportunity, not only in Paraguay, but in all of Latin America. So depending on the business that you have and depending on how you have your lifestyle set up, then this could potentially be a good structure for you. Okay, last, we have the UAE. What time are we at? We have the UAE. So I'm sure we've all heard of the UAE, Dubai, free zone company. So businesses with less than around, again, in local currency, but around 102K in business income or having a free zone company will, as it stands right now, have a 0% tax rate. If you have over 102K, then you have 9% tax. Multinationals won't really be applicable, but a 15% tax. Personal income tax is 0%, so still not bad when compared to most other countries in the world. This is a great situation. You can also get residency with your business and live in the UAE. Of course, there are some requirements around that, as there always is. So the UAE is a really great option for not only living and having a great quality of life, also for a company formation. But for me, this is a great example of governments getting a taste of tax. So they implemented the 9% tax not too long ago, and they also have tax on some sweets and some candies. So for me, I just find it very interesting that, in my opinion, once governments get a taste for tax, they're never going to go back. That's how, we started with 1% tax in America, and look where we are now. So in my opinion, governments will never regress and go back. And so I'm curious to see how the UAE and taxes will pan out in the future now that they have implemented this 9% tax. Okay, so best freelancer options. Now, I know I just gave you so much information, depending on the size of the business, the industry, where your clients are, there are so many, as I've mentioned, there's so many considerations that you need to think about before just blindly choosing any of these options. And there are others as well, any of these options that I have spoken about. Some good ones to start out could potentially be Estonia, Paraguay, the US LLC, the UK LLP, Bulgaria, if you're looking into Europe. But again, depends on your residency, your clients, your banking needed. So when I was going over this with my partner, he was like, I'm overwhelmed. So if you are overwhelmed, we can book a call. Just email me. My email is nicole@workwealthandtravel.com. I'll also have it in the last slide. Okay, so some considerations. Now, company formation is, as I mentioned, not the first piece of the puzzle to low or no taxes, which we're going to dive into. If you're looking to live and to have a business abroad with low taxes, there are some considerations that you need to think about first. So what are these? First, you have your home country residency. Become a non-resident in your home or your current country, wherever you may be now. If that's high taxing, probably if you're looking into this game, this lifestyle, this company formation setup, then probably where you are now, if it's a high taxing country, a Western country, Canada, America, probably not going to be the best option for you. Now, Americans, as I'm sure many of you know, have a little bit of a different situation than the rest of the world. They are based on citizenship, taxation, which I have some strong opinions around, but we won't dive into. And then most other Western countries are based around the residency taxation system. So these are two very different systems. Now, America, while I think it's really unfortunate that a country does that to you and ties you to that country almost forever, it is nice because America is one of the countries that you can, or basically the only country that you can actually be a tax resident of nowhere, technically. Most other countries, and increasingly more so now, if you are a tax resident of nowhere, then by default, you are a tax resident of whichever country you are living in, you have that official tax residency in. So may not always, again, be the most beneficial country for you. They're going to try to want to keep you in their system as much as possible, which is why being a non-resident first is key. Before the company formation, before anything else, your home country residency is really key. So you want to look at revoking that residency first before starting this process. And revoking residency looks different for everybody. Let me just take a sip of water. It looks different for everybody, again, depending on your country, where you're from, where you're currently tied to as a resident. In most countries, I think we hear, the 183-day rule and test, and that still holds some merit, but not really nearly as much as it has in the past, especially since many more individuals have started living this nomadic and global citizen lifestyle. So great example is if you are looking to leave many countries now, they will do somewhat of a test for you. So yes, the 183 days is considered, but so is where you bank and where you have credit cards and where your driver's license is, and where, of course, you have the passport, where you have community and organization if you're part of a church group or a social group. Some countries will ask you about your newspaper subscription. They will ask you, they want to know everything. They want to really try to tie you to that country as much as possible. They want to know, do you have a storage unit there? How big is your storage unit? Where is your current residence or the residence that you're going to be moving to? And what's the address there? Like, they want all of it, because if at all possible, they want to tie you back to that country, because why would they not want your tax dollars? So then the next piece, so this is step one. Step two is your new tax residency in a beneficial country. So you really want to do the research and figure out, where do you want to be a new tax resident? Somewhere, where do you want to get that new tax residency once you've gotten rid of your home country's tax residency? And ideally, you want that to be in a low or no tax country or in a territorial tax country, meaning that they will only tax you on the income made inside of that country, not on your worldwide global income. So, yeah, so you really just want to be sure that the country that you're moving to, you want to have a plan in place. This is how I like to do it. I want to make sure where I'm going, where I'm getting residency, where I'm moving to, where I'm investing in real estate, is that going to benefit me? Are there going to be tax benefits? Potentially, if I live there for 2, 3, 5 years, there's going to be a easier pathway to citizenship or residency. In this game, as I like to call it, I like to think ahead. Yes, I'm moving to a new country and getting tax residence, and that's benefiting me, but what else can I get from that country as well? Really move to a beneficial country, moving to a Panama territorial tax country, great for banking, but also you can work your way to citizenship. After you live there for a certain amount of years and pass some requirements and tests, you really want to think ahead instead of just hopping on a plane and going somewhere that looks great, but is that going to benefit you in 3, 5, 10 years? So the third piece of the puzzle, so just to kind of go in a linear order, we have 1, 2, the third piece of the puzzle, once you have those 2 previous pieces figured out, is the low tax company formation, which is what we spoke about, and some of those jurisdictions that I had previously shown of where could potentially be beneficial. Now you're going to want to start on that piece. So sometimes I'll have clients come to me and questioning and really wanting, of course, the low tax company formation and saying, hey, is this country in Europe a good place? Well, it can be, but I don't know anything about you or your residence or where you're planning to live, or if you're just planning to travel full time, because then that's very different for your tax residence if you don't really have a home base. No, I need to see the full picture, not just start with a company formation. So based on various criteria, such as where your clients are from, where you live, payment processors that are needed, et cetera, this is going to determine the best jurisdiction for your business formation. I cannot say, we talked about Romania or the UAE, that's going to be best for you. It really is a holistic, all-encompassing picture of what's going to look best for you. So you want to make sure, of course, that you can easily bank in that country and that there are various options for having a business and ideally personal, if at all possible as well, bank account in that country as well. There are some countries I have come across where even though you're a resident, even if you have a business, sometimes it may not be the easiest to open a bank account there, which I know sounds wild, but I have come across that. So you really want to think at the beginning with the end in mind, which is what I have learned through working with clients and seeing this whole journey play out, is you will run into some difficulties, which usually can be resolved depending on the situation, but it's always best to just not get in that situation where you have the business, but it's going to be more difficult to get a bank account in that country. And then the fourth piece of the puzzle is your banking. So this is something, again, that many people don't think about, especially for personal banking, but again, sometimes for business until it's too late. So can you easily have access to different banks in your new country of residence? Some of these countries don't offer safe or reliable banking, which is fine to keep a little bit of money in. But if that is where your residence and your business now is that a safe enough country to keep all of your money in? Maybe yes, but maybe no. And you want to have as many accounts as possible, in my opinion, for diversification around the globe. I know not all of my clients feel this way, but for me, I don't use all of my accounts. I have 7, 8 just personal accounts in countries around the globe. And if I can ever get more in any country or for whatever reason, then I will. I like to have diversification because, especially with banking, governments, it's always subject to the government. Are they going to close your account? Did you do a big transfer? Are there some AML, anti-money laundering protocols that you haven't passed? It's never truly up to you. And once you give the bank, I mean, I'm sure probably most of them will give you back your money, you would hope. But once you deposit it, it's technically the bank's money. And I like to have as many options for bank accounts around the globe. Don't just trust one or two. So how can you open a bank account abroad? So you can travel to the new country if, again, kind of like I mentioned, where not always, especially increasingly more so now, going to allow you to open a bank account if you're just a tourist on a tourist visa for a few months, but potential, depending on where your passport is from as well. You can invest in property in a country. You can start a business, of course, in a country. You can deposit for some countries, especially here in Latin America, deposit 10, 100K and keep that balance. And they are happy to have you. Some actually really reliable banks that we work with 5, 10K, pretty low amounts. And then access to private banking. If you have little bit of a higher net worth, then of course you have access to private banking in some of the best banking countries around the globe. Your Singapore's, your Switzerland's. Okay, so common missing piece, again, when it comes to banking. Before you start this journey and cut potential ties with your home country, ask yourself, will I be able to access my money, both personal and business, easily and through more than just a fintech bank, which is what I was talking about on the previous slide. It's great to have fintech banks, but you also want to really have a stable bank. A lot of fintech banks are just companies with a bank backing them behind them, but they're really just companies. So what are fintech banks? You have your Wise, your Revolut, your N26. There are so many out there. Bunk. There's quite a few, depending on the country that you're from. I actually have a freebie and I list, I don't know, 10, 20 of the different fintech banks around the globe. And the benefit of fintechs is that you can usually just open them from your home. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to fly to that country. You don't have to go to a certain bank to open it. But because there is that convenience factor, I'm always wary. And again, this comes to my personal diversification mindset. I'm always wary that they can close that account for any reason. I have heard lately, unfortunately, quite a few Wise closures in one of the communities that I'm in, quite a few Wise closures of bank accounts. So you don't want to have all of your money, don't have everything for your business or your personal, have various different business options as well. But you don't want to have everything in just one bank account. I believe in the case of Wise, they returned the money to the people, and then they gave them 30 days notice to get that money into another bank elsewhere before the account would close. But a lot of the time, they also won't tell you why they're closing the account on you. They will just show you their terms of service. And that's kind of that. You'll never be able to get an answer from them. Unfortunately, something I have been hearing more and more. So have different options, both in stable banks around the globe and, of course, fintech options, which are easier. But you really want to have a diversification of more than just fintechs. Okay, so here's all my socials if you want to connect. I do want to talk about the ambassador program for SafetyWing. And this is a really great program. If you haven't signed up, it's completely free. I highly, highly recommend it. You can make passive income simply. I know passive income is such a buzzword, and I don't love that, quite honestly, because nothing is completely passive, in my opinion. You do have to promote it and do the work, but SafetyWing is, of course, you're here, you know what a reliable company they are and how they help digital nomads and global citizens around the globe. So make passive income that can go into your personal if you don't have a company structure set up. But they also have the option on the back end to have the income from your affiliates that you refer to the SafetyWing program to go into a business account as well. So that can be considered business income, which if you do have a business structure set up in any country, that's probably the way that I would recommend, because it likely will be business income. So it's nice that they give you those two options. And if you haven't signed up, I highly recommend doing so. I know Sam has the link. And if you would like to connect with me, I know I mentioned my podcast and YouTube, which I post quite a bit of long form content going into these topics in much more detail on specifically my YouTube, but also my podcast. And then you can connect with me via email, my website, and all of my socials are work, wealth, and travel. So I know that this was a lot of information today. I hope that you can hopefully watch the replay when it's on YouTube and really start digesting some of this if it is a little bit bombarding, because I know there's a lot thrown at you and not all structures, like I said, are going to work best for every individual. But to really start thinking about your global citizen, I like to call your global citizen diversification options. I am so passionate. And the reason why I do what I do and I help clients is because I truly believe go to a country that's going to benefit you, give your money and your dollars to the local economy and the country where it is going to work for you. And in that, build a lifestyle by design, build a lifestyle that works best for you. I left Canada for a reason, and I'm sure everyone here are global citizens and digital nomads for a reason. you want to carve out your own lifestyle design. And this is a really important piece of that puzzle. That's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was a lot of info, but it's good info. We had everyone stay to the very end because this is information that we need to know. So like Nicole said, it has been recorded. We will distribute the recording. And so if you feel like you didn't capture exactly everything, she's got you. Okay, time for a couple questions. You feel up for that? Do you need some more water, Nicole?
I'm out of my water, so let's dive into it.
Okay, cool. So when you were going through flows through, that was happening, midway through your presentation. Alice had a question on what exactly does that mean? Can you clarify?
Yeah, good question. So a flow through, also potentially called a pass through entity, simply means that you have a company structure, but it's not taxed in that country. So the US is a really popular one. So you're not taxed in the US, your income in the business actually flows directly through to where you are a resident of. So that's why with this structure in specific, you really want to make sure that your residency is optimized first, that you're paying low or no tax in a country where you are a resident of, and that country offers you low or no tax. And then you set up that structure and you just have to file, in this case, the LLC the proper way. So you're not going to be an S Corp, you're not going to be a C Corp. You're going to make sure that you file it properly with the IRS. And then any income, you do still have those reporting requirements. You'll still need an accountant to do very basic filing, but the filing is going to be you owe zero to the government of the United States, to the IRS. You're going to flow that income through to wherever you are a personal tax resident and then pay tax there.
Okay, got it. Very clear. Thank you. There's some interesting questions about driver's license. So in the example of Rita travels by motorbike and therefore has to be in British Columbia for 6 months of the year. I'm from BC as well. Or they take away Rita's driver's license, which has actually happened before, and it was a huge hassle. Do most countries have this rule? What driver's license do you have? What can we share with Rita?
Okay, yeah. So it depends on the country. Rita, I don't know where you are it sounds like you're still in the Canadian system as a resident. So you can keep I'm also Canadian, so I went through this whole process. You can keep your driver's license. And again, the country, and in every country, it depends on the individual that you actually get who assesses your case as well. You'll get a different answer depending on that individual. Sometimes they will require you. Technically, you do need to get rid of your driver's license. However, if you have severed enough other ties to the country, in most cases, then they will let you keep some bank accounts, of course, your passport in the case of Canada, and potentially your license as well. May not be something that once it expires, if you go to renew, that could raise some red flags. But if you have enough ties cut from that country and you do have a residence elsewhere, then some governments will be okay with that. And in the case of Canada, you will fill out the form NR73, I believe it is. So they will give you a definite determination based on if you have your license, if you don't have your license, and all the other information that you give them, if you are a resident or not in Canada. I hope that answers your question. I am not too sure if I hit the nail on the head with that one.
As someone who recently moved to BC and got my driver's license, I know how annoying the process can be, specifically in BC. So I can just imagine this adds a whole other layer to it.
And
So
one other
thanks for
thing
knowing so much.
Yeah, one other thing that I do want to note on driver's license is there's quite a few countries where once you obtain residency, they will give you a driver's license. And sometimes they don't even require you to do a test. Actually, most of the time, they don't even require you to do a test, which was mind blowing to me at first. But of course, you can drive, you have your license elsewhere. And sometimes they'll usually want to know your blood type as well, is pretty common. And then they'll give you your driver's license if you get residence in that country. So if you, for whatever reason in the future, don't renew your license or you decide to revoke your license in Canada or any other Western country, you do, once you get residence in another country, you have options to still have a valid driver's license somewhere in the world, because that's important.
Okay. What about pension schemes? So Leonandro wants to know about that. Should they keep the one from their home country or set up a new one in a new country?
Depends on the country that you're going to. And it depends where you're from. So if you are American, it's going to look a lot different than if you are potentially from another country, but it depends where you're going. So some countries will tax you based on that because that money is going to be coming into the country and you're using that money in the country. So it's really, that's when we would work more on a case by case basis with the individual based on where they're coming from, where they're going, and what the trajectory of what you're looking to do. If you're looking to just stay in one country and live there, I actually had a case of Argentina not too long ago. There's been quite a bit of interest there. That's going to look a lot different than if you plan to get residency in multiple countries, live off your pension, and travel the world full time. But typically, you will be taxed on that pension in most places.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you live in one EU country and be a tax resident in another EU country? That's a question from Roy.
Interesting. I guess it would depend if you are not a citizen and if you live in an EU country. I mean, EU is nice because they have the Schengen zone. So you will have to, I guess, technically be a resident in one of those countries, pay taxes in one of those countries, but doesn't mean with having the EU access, it doesn't mean that you have to stay there. But there is going to be one country in the EU that's going to tie you to actually having to pay taxes there, have your residency there, to being set up there personally on a personal level. But then I guess you still have the freedom to travel based on that. But again, it would kind of look a little bit different depending on what you're planning to do, if you're planning to really live there or just travel. And then, of course, depending on where your passport's from, if you're American, it's going to look a little bit different.
Okay. Last question. This one's from Michaela. So Michaela's a little bit confused because a lot of countries do ask you to be a resident and also have taxes there in order to keep your residency. How can you split up these two?
Yeah, good question. So again, it's not always possible. If at all possible, you do want to, you can have additional residencies. So you don't only have to have one residency. I have a few different residencies and a few different passports. But then you need to have, you don't ideally want tax residency, hopefully, in more than one place. So you want to have a place, and sometimes they will require you to spend 6 months a year. Other countries, they won't. So that's kind of where the strategy piece comes into play and what your lifestyle looks like. But you really want to have one tax residency in a territorial tax country, in a country that's going to benefit you somehow, and then have residencies usually in that country as well, but acquire as many different residencies as possible. So Mexico has a great residency program. If you're looking to invest, like Panama, the 200K, then that's a great residency program. There's quite a few beneficial ones that are pretty easy to get, and some of them don't require almost any time on the ground in that country. But you want to acquire, in my opinion, for diversification, as many residencies as possible, and then have tax residency in that one country, which you will likely also be a resident of, but you want wherever your tax residency is to benefit you for tax purposes. Of course, you don't want to start having, you could have tax residency in two countries, but then you're going to get into double tax treaties and it's just going to look a lot messier. So again, this comes with the game, as I like to call it. This comes with pre-planning and figuring out what your lifestyle design looks like and how you want your future to look, where you want that residency, tax residency, and where you want to spend your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole. And as we said, there are a recording of this that is going to be going out, and then reach out to Nicole. I know some questions didn't get answered, but this is what she's available for. So maybe we can throw up your contact information one more time if you have it, Nicole. And then in the chat, let's also post another link to invite you to become part of our ambassador program. I'll do that here. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Elena. And we hope to see you there. Like I said, we've been doing these webinars now. I think we're doing 3 a month for the last year and a half. So you should be on our email list now. You'll get invited to the next one. And this is how you can connect with Nicole. So on that note, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I hope you found it valuable.